Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Zoro 1 training session. And this is training session 1, where we'll be covering some basics of your Zoro 1 or Zoro ERP system. In this training session, we're going to cover largely logging in, reviewing your data, going to see some modules, and basically navigating your way through the system and how to get around. So we're expected to go about an hour here, maybe an hour and a half. Let's get started. So I'm going to access the system. The first thing I'll do is basically open my browser. And we do recommend to all our users to use Chrome just because things have been tested in Google Chrome. Everything's expected to work the way it should in that browser. So in case you're not already using Chrome, you can download it. It's a free download from Google's website. So once you load up Chrome, basically you'll log in using your credentials. And what's going to happen is basically, in case you're already not set up by your admin, just ask them to create a user for you. And what'll happen is when they create a user in the system, that'll send an email to you, and you'll get a link in that email to the system. So basically, this link right here, and you'll be able to log in using those temporary credentials, and it'll force you to set up a new password. So once you set up the password, you'll be greeted with usually a dashboard, and so this is largely the system. So, and we do recommend that all users of the system basically use their own unique credentials to log in, just because much of the system, whenever you save something, update something, or void something, there'll always be a source stamp of where that actually came from. So for that reason, you want to make sure that if you're logged in using your account, that it's recommended that nobody else be logging in under that account as well. So, and also to keep in mind that you can't log in at the same time using the same account from two different computers. Basically, it'll kick the first person out that was already logged in. So, just another thing to keep in mind. Now, navigating our way through the system here, you can see that the left-hand side is basically the navigation menu. So this is where you can dig through the menu and go through your modules. So for example, if I wanted to create a sales order, I can go sales order right here. And now I'm at the sales order module. Pretty straightforward. If I want to go to the sales order center, I can just do that right here, right? I can also search for it in this menu. So I can go through this menu here and use the arrow keys to basically toggle through these modules, my search results, and then I can just tap enter, and that'll open the sales order module here. So this is the menu, this left-hand side. This is largely the area that you can go through to navigate to a different module in the system, right? And the search menu here basically searches through all these modules that are available to you. Now, depending on your access that you've been granted by your admin, you're likely going to see less modules than what I'm seeing. Likely an admin will see all the modules that I'm actually seeing. Now at the top here, you've got basically your global search. And on the global search here, and before, just as a quick note here, the middle of this page is going to be basically your module. So this is where you'll be interacting with most of the data. Some of the controls and commonly used functions are at the top right here. Typically save, for example, that's going to be at the top right. Now going back to global search here, the global search basically searches for existing transactions in the system. So if you have existing sales orders that you've saved, credit memos, journal entries, any transactions that exist in the system, even if they're items or master data, things like that, you can actually search for them using this global search. So for instance, I can just punch in my search criteria here, and some of the search criteria is quite wide. So, for example, you can search by reference number, memo, check number, even the amount. If you know, for example, a particular order is a certain amount, you can put that in, and it'll show up as well. And then simply just click on the result here, and it'll pop open. Now, of course, this is dependent upon what you have access to, so it's only going to search basically whatever you have access to, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, on the top right here, you have a notification system, so you can click on this bell, and this is basically how you can get notified with your other peers that are working within the Zoro system. So Instead of clogging emails and sending extra emails back and forth within the app, you can actually message other users from within the system, and we'll discuss exactly how to do that in some of the subsequent trainings. But just know that when you get notified by another user in the system, here's where you can actually access that notification. So for example, I have one notification here. This is the notification. I can then click on this, open this up, and then maybe make a reply or do the action that I was notified for. All right. This question mark here is your access to Zoro Help. So Zoro Help is basically an online help portal. So for example, if I click on this voiding a sales order, it's going to take me to the online help portal that basically is going to show me videos, FAQs, walkthroughs, guides, and basically a whole bunch of articles that's going to help me navigate my way through the system and perform things that maybe I'm not sure how to do or I've simply forgotten. So Zoro Help is it's going to be your first go-to resource for any sort of help, or if you're not sure how to do something within the system, definitely you want to access Zoro Help to initiate that. Now, by default, it's always going to access articles that are defaulted for the sales order. So, for example, I'm on the sales order page right now. So it's always going to give me sales order articles that are relevant to that module. Now, of course, I can search for other articles as well. So you can do something like this, and it's going to search for a whole bunch of articles that are relevant for purchase orders. So that's the Zoro Help platform here that's available inbuilt within the app. Your recent activity just tracks what you've recently created, saved, or voided. And this is going to be only for you. So somebody else that's logged in, they'll see it only for them. And so this is a good way to jump back and forth between a bunch of modules and basically keep a track of what you're working on. If I click on the three dots here, there's a couple additional options that appear for me. Set a start page basically lets you set a specific page as your default page so that when you log in, you're always greeted with that page. By default, you'll be sent to one of the dashboards, but you can change that with this set a start page option. You can set specific modules as favorites. So for example, I can add my sales order center. I'd actually just removed it from favorites. If I add it, it'll get pinned here on the top left. So this is a good way to take a whole bunch of modules that you most commonly use and just pin them on the top left here. Page defaults, this is typically for admins. You can actually set a bunch of defaults for a particular page. So if you want, once a page is loaded, if you want certain things selected, in this case, you can select the status of orders automatically. So if you only want to see open, released, and partially shipped orders, you can do that. So this is something that's available by default to admins, but this is something the admins can set up. Global search settings just lets you restrict what you're searching in the global search here. Typically, we just leave this by default so that it'll search for everything. That's usually the best way to go about this one. Test mode is only something for Zoro admins that they'll see. And the disable confirm pop-ups, if you leave this on, it won't give you any confirmation pop-ups anymore. So if you leave this off by default, you'll notice that every time you click save, it'll always confirm it for you. It'll always say, oh, are you sure what you're doing? Are you sure you want to go through this transaction? And so if you actually turn this on, it won't give you that pop-up anymore. It'll simply go through with the transaction. This setting is if you want to fix your sidebar here, and log out simply logs you out of the system. So those are basically some of the features that are available by default on all the pages. Now let's talk a little bit about the system itself. So a large portion of the system, the way it behaves is you create a module, you save a transaction. So for example, if I save a sales order, it's going to live in the sales order center. So that's, I'd say, about 80 to 90% of the system. That's the way it behaves. If you save an entry, it's going to live in its respective center. So largely, that's how most of the system behaves. And you'll notice that as you're creating other transactions throughout the system, that once you save it, it lives in its own center. Now let's go ahead. Let's review some of the data that you will have uploaded by now during your onboarding process. So if you go to accounting, chart of accounts. So these are some of the chart of accounts, actually all the chart of accounts that have been uploaded into the system. You can see here that these have all been created. Now, if you need to create a new account, it's pretty easy. You can just right-click on an account, click on Add New. It's going to pop up the account module, and you can just fill in the form here to create a new account. That's the same as if I were to click on here, this account module, and just simply fill in this information and then hit Save. Now, if I were to save it, it would go back and it would live in this chart of accounts. Now, the biggest thing here is once you've uploaded your chart of accounts, you want to make sure that your account type and your currency are correct. The reason I say those two is because once transactions begin to take place on your accounts, you want to make sure that those two are correct, because once transactions are there, it's going to be very hard to change this. In fact, you'll have to undo everything in order to change the account type and currency, just because the way Xoro works is that accounting backbone that's been built in, it depends a lot on the account type. So a lot of the functionality is driven by that account type and currency. And so once transactions are in, it's going to block you from changing those two fields. So before you actually go live and start creating transactions in the system, you want to make sure that your account type and currency are accurate. And so the best way to do that is simply, have your bookkeeping team or your accounting team just go through all of these accounts and just make sure that they're accurate. If they need to be changed, simply you can just double click an account here and then change the type or change the currency. Now, I say account type and currency because everything else can be changed whenever. So for instance, the name or the GL of the account, those can be changed whenever, even if there's transactions on them. But type and currency, you want to make sure that those are accurate. Now, let's head on over to the item center. So this is where all your SKUs live. And so we've got some SKUs here. I'm actually going to sort them by create date. And you'll notice that I'm actually using some of the features that a lot of the centers have. So what I did, for instance, was I enabled this column here, this create date column. I added it to my view, and then I sorted it. So you have that flexibility within Xoro to add and remove columns. You also have the ability to change the order of the columns, like I can here. Right? Bring it back. So for example, maybe I don't want restocking fee. I don't care about active. But, maybe I do want some options available to me. So I, for example, do want option 1 code, option 2 code. There we go. And maybe I'll move these over here. There we go. Right? So you might do something like that. You might enable more rows that you want to see. So for example, right now, I've got a lot of items. In fact, 1,234 to be exact items in the item center in the system. So these are individual SKUs that have been created. But right now I'm only showing 20 of those SKUs, 1 to 20. Right? So now if I actually click this floppy disk, it's going to save this view for me. So if I refresh this page, it's always going to show me this page in that view. And this is going to be specific for me. So someone else who's logged in on their own account, they can set up their own view however they like it, right? So these are the items here. And so I mentioned that, you can enable or disable these columns. You can toggle them. You can click the floppy disk to save them. This simply refreshes the data. On the far right here, here's how you can export this information. So if I wanted to export these 20 rows that I'm viewing right now, I can simply click on this and then choose my format that I want to export it to. Now, if I wanted to export all those rows, 1,234, I can simply enable this export all feature and then go ahead and choose my format. So, for example, this is a great way to build additional reports. I can simply, export this to Excel and then from there build pivot tables, do graphs and additional reports, customize them to my liking. So this is one of the ways that you can build a lot of custom reports within the system. is through the centers and exporting this data. Now let's talk about the filtering capabilities that you will have available to you. So if you click on this advanced search here on the top right, you can filter some of your data. So for example, I can say, okay, well, find me all the items that start with, let's say, CHS. So I'm going to find all these SKUs that start with this style number. Fine. So I found actually 14 SKUs with this style. Now from here, I can say, okay, well, find me all the SKUs that have an option 2 code of S. Now, when I do S, it's going to include for me extra small as well because I did contains. But if I wanted just small, I could say equals. Go. And there we go. Now we have our 3 SKUs that fit this search criteria that we've built. Now you can do all kinds of searches here. So for example, I can add another filter here and I can say, okay, well, amongst these 3 SKUs, find me the SKUs that have a standard price, maybe greater than 10. Right? In this case, actually, all of them have a standard price of greater than 10, so it's going to find all 3 for me. But this is one of the ways that you can filter the results, the records that you're looking for, and then from here you can even, export this data and then build reports. Or if you just wanted to find this and maybe edit it, this is the quickest way, one of the quickest ways that you can search for data. And also, this searching capability is available in basically all the centers. So once you get a good feel for searching this way in one of the centers, it's pretty much the exact same way in the other centers. All right, that's good to cover. Now let's hop on over to the customer center. Take through the menu here. So you'll probably have uploaded your customers by now. If not, then basically there won't be any customers in this center for you. But as you can see here, we've got our customers uploaded. Now it's pretty straightforward. If you wanted to edit these customers, I can simply right-click and click on Open. And for example, I can see here that I've got all these customers and I can edit all their information. So I can click on contact info. I can basically fill in this information here. I can add additional bill tos, ship tos, edit payment information, and so on. So in case I needed to edit a customer at any point, this is the way to do it. Of course, you've probably been using the uploader, the master uploader, to upload all your customers into the system, especially if you've got quite a number of them. It's always recommended that if you've got more, then you can actually key in to use the uploader for that. Now, going forward, if you needed to create new customers, you can simply use a customer module. And it's going to have all the fields available to you that were available while you did your master upload using the CSV files. But this time you'll actually enter them in directly into the system rather than using a CSV uploader. So this is how you can manage customers. You have several options here where you can actually merge customers. So in case you needed to combine customers, you can right-click and actually delete customers. There's a lot of capabilities from this customer center here. Now, if we go to vendors, it's a very similar setup here. You probably have your vendors set up. You can just simply double-click them in case you wanted to edit them. It's got a very similar sort of structure, just like the customers, where you've got your address information and so on. You can right-click, and there's some options here as well, including deleting customers. Just a note that deleting customers and vendors, that will permanently delete them from the system. And you won't be able to delete them if there's orders or transactions that have been placed on the customers or vendors. It's only vendors or customers without any of those transactions that you can delete. And of course, if you needed to create a new vendor from scratch, you can just click on the vendor module, fill in the information on this form here, hit save, and it'll get added to your vendor center. Now, just a quick note that you probably used either upload products or upload items to get your SKUs into the system. The upload modules, in addition to being great modules for entering your master data into the system, they can be also used for batch updating. So for example, if I needed to change the pricing or maybe a group or a field on the item master for, let's say, 100 SKUs, the best way to do that is actually go to this module, upload products or upload items, whichever one you're using, download the master data file, which will give me all of the SKUs from the system in CSV format. And all I can do, and then all I need to do really is filter out those 100 SKUs that I need to edit, delete the rest in the file, edit that field for those 100 SKUs, save the file, and upload it back in. The system will recognize that this is the same item based on the SKU, and so it's going to make an update to that existing item in the system. So this is the best way to batch update a whole bunch of items at once. Now you can do something similar for a lot of the master data in the system. So for example, with customers, um, with users, vendors, any of the master data you can actually upload using this way. And in fact, that's probably the best way to upload your master data into the system. Now, you've probably also uploaded your sales orders and purchase orders. You've either keyed them in or you're going to key them in along with the training. So if you've uploaded them, they're going to be living in the sales order center. And if you've uploaded POs, vendor POs, they'll be living in the purchase order center. Right, so this is along with once your master data is in the system, once you're a little bit further along, you'll be actually creating orders in preparation for go live. Now, another thing of note is you've probably already set up users in the system. So this is how you can manage all your users by going to the user center. And there's a couple features here which are of note. So you can actually right click and reset the password. I can double click here in case I needed to change the name or anything like that. Now, of note here is, let's say, you have a user who's temporarily leaving and you don't want them to be able to log into the system. You can deactivate a user, so you can just untick this and click on update. So deactivated users won't count towards your subscription. Um, that's probably the best way to deactivate users in the system. And let's say you needed to create a new user, you can deactivate one of the old ones and then simply create a user here, click on user, and fill in the information here, make sure it's got a valid email, and then click on save. And then an email will be sent to that user and they'll be able to fill in basically, set up their password and then from there log into the system and proceed. Now, the user center, I mentioned that you can, reset the password. You can also delete users, which will permanently delete the user from the system. Silent users is of note. This is a great way to set up reps in the system that maybe you don't want access to Zoro. So silent users actually cannot log in. That's of note. And silent users don't count towards your subscription as well, your user subscription. So but if you want them for reporting purposes, you want to be able to select a user for reporting purposes, a sales rep, for instance. You can create a sales rep, make them silent. They won't be able to log in, but you'll be able to always choose them as a rep in the system. Okay, so that's good. That's users that you can set up in the system. If you go to company info, here's where you can add some basic company information. You can put in your address here. You can set up a company logo. This is good so that when reports get generated out of the system, they'll actually use this company logo here. So you want to make sure that those have been set up. If you go to the carrier center, you want to make sure your carriers and ship services are also set up in the ship service center. So depending on your situation, if you're connected to a 3PL or if you're doing your self-fulfillment, you'll want to set up your carriers in a particular way. Definitely mention that to your onboarding account manager in case it already hasn't been brought up. So this is how you can basically set up carriers. And setting up a new carrier is pretty simple. You can just click on carrier and fill in the information here and then hit save, right? So that's basically how you can set up carriers in the system. Let's talk a little bit about basically defaults and also Access Manager. So let's talk a little bit. I'm going to go to the admin. I'm going to go to the Access Manager. So the Access Manager is where you as an admin can control which one of your users has access to what in the system. So for example, let's say you've created a whole bunch of sales reps in the system. You can actually, and you've given them a role of sales rep. So you can go to the role of sales rep. And from here, you can actually control what access that role has. So for example, you want to give them sales order access. Maybe you want to give them payment access as well. And any sort of other access you can actually control from here. And what that'll do is, for example, let's say I want to give them, let's see here. Let's say we want to give them invoice access. So I'll click on grant access. Now what will happen is all the users who have a role of sales rep, they will have access to invoices. Now if I want to revoke that access, it's pretty simple. Just untick this, click on grant access. So it's pretty straightforward. Now if you want to control a particular user's access, I can click on user here, and I can click on the user that I want to change. And you can see right now their access is based on their role. So because they have a role of accounting, this is the access they have. Now, if I want to customize their role, I can click on Custom, and then from here I can pick and choose basically what modules they will have access to. And you'll see here that once you drill down, for example, if I go to Sales, Sales Order, there's quite a bit of options that you can choose from, and there's quite a bit that you can control what the user has access to, including creating, canceling, editing, voiding, and so on. So this is largely how the Access Manager works and how you can control what users have access to what. In addition to this module, there's also the User Store Mapping module, which lets you control which users have access to which warehouses system. So by default, these should have been set up by your account manager. And occasionally, if you create a new user, they're trying to save a transaction for a particular warehouse, they may get a message that says, they're not allowed to create that transaction for that warehouse. So this is the module where you'd go to resolve that. So here, for example, I see Rich, they have access to the LA and Vancouver warehouse, right? But let's say, maybe I click on somebody else's user, they may not have access to that. And you can actually revoke access as well. So I can actually delete access here, give access back to a particular warehouse, and so on. And you can actually change it so that a default store is applied as well. So for example, for this user, the default store is LA. I can change it to Vancouver. And what will happen is every time a module is loaded, it'll by default select Vancouver for that user, for that particular user. So you want to make sure that users have access to these warehouses if you want them to create transactions for those particular warehouses. All right, so that is basically this user store mapping module. A couple of admin things of note. The tax structure of the system will have already been set up by your account manager, but do let us know in case you're adding additional nexuses. So if you're adding a new physical location in perhaps another country or another state or province, definitely let us know about any of those changes within your company. We'll make sure that the tax codes have been updated so that your operation can run smoothly. So just reach out to us through one of the tickets or your account manager, and they'll be able to make sure that everything's been set up accordingly. And otherwise, you won't really need to go through any of these tax modules. In fact, it's usually recommended not to. Instead, just contact your account manager, and they'll be able to take care of it from there. Let's talk a little bit about payment terms. I'm actually going to put payment term here. Let's go to the payment term center. By default, there'll be some out-of-the-box payment terms that have been set up on your instance. So in this case, we've got net 30, net 45, CIA, and so on. So If you need additional payment terms, I would recommend going to this payment term center. Make sure they're not already set up. If they're not, then simply click on payment term here. Fill in the information. You can use the payment term center for your existing payment terms as a reference to see how, for example, 2% 10 net 30 has been set up. You can see here that there's a 2% discount if the payment's been made within 10 days, and the due date is basically net 30 days here. So this is basically how you can control payment terms. You can delete them as well in case they haven't already been used. Let's go to the payment method center now. And so here we've got some payment methods that have been set up out of the box. In case you need additional ones, you can set them up too. You can click on payment method and you can just set them up here. By default, most of the ones that you'll use have already been created here, and this is where you can basically manage them. All right, let's talk about exchange rates. Click on Add Exchange Rate. All right. And so here's where you can basically control your foreign exchange rates that have been set up in the system. Now, the way it works in Xoro is by default you will have a home currency. So this is where the currency in which you file your taxes for, where you remit your taxes. You're basically your home country of operation. Now, any additional currencies that you work with are all foreign, and they can be added by selecting the currency here, putting in a rate manually, and clicking on Add Update. Now, once it's been added to this bottom rows here, Xoro will basically use a third-party app that'll already be set up for you, and it'll fetch the latest rate. I think it does it every 2 hours. Nonetheless, at least every day, it'll actually fetch the latest rate, and it'll actually populate the rate here. Now, per transaction, it'll actually, let's say you have a USD transaction, which is a foreign transaction, it'll actually fetch this latest rate here. But if you needed to change that, you can actually change that rate on the transaction. So if you need a rate of 1.2, you can change that as well. But by default, it'll always fetch this rate here. Now you can disable this too. So if you don't want it fetching the latest rate from the third-party API, you can disable that, and then you can control the rate manually from within the system. That's an option as well. Just let your account manager know how you would like that set up. But by default, this is how you can add foreign currencies and manage them through there. All right. Now, one more thing. Let's talk about my workspace. So this module is pretty cool. Here's where you can actually set up default dashboards and custom dashboards. So for example, let's say we want to create a new dashboard. I'm going to click on Save. Now, the dashboards that have been built into the system that come out of the box, these have been pre-built for you. So they contain graphs and information that have already been set up that a lot of our users have already found to be quite helpful. But if you want to customize your own dashboard and maybe pick and choose what exactly you want to see, you can do that with this module. So here we've created a new workspace called My New Dashboard. And I can click on Add Component. And now here I can actually go ahead and add some individually. I can basically add whatever stats or graphs I wanted. So for example, I'll add an open invoices stat. I'll add a P&L graph maybe. Maybe I want some manufacturing information too, or maybe I want some warehouse information as well. So let's say line shipped. I can do something like that. I can add it. And we can add a lot of different sort of components here that will be available to your dashboard. So if I were to hit save here on the top right, let's save this custom dashboard, and now I can actually always access this dashboard. So I can make it my new dashboard, and I can edit it to always be my default dashboard. There we go. So now what will happen is now every time I go to my workspace, by default, it'll select that dashboard for me. And in addition to that, you can actually make this your start page so that when you log in, you're always greeted with your custom dashboard. And so that way, basically, one-click login, and you can see right away whatever you're interested in, whatever graphs you wanted to see, whatever you wanted to pull up, you'll have access to that right away. All right, so let's talk a little bit about tickets. Now, the way it works for Xoro is we mentioned Xoro Help here on the top right. So that's going to be one resource that's available to you in terms of help and support. So the first sort of level of support that we recommend is Xoro Help. So in case you're looking to do something, you're not sure, maybe you want to review something, you can always use Xoro Help. In addition to that, you'll always have the training videos that will be recorded. So the training sessions that will be conducted by your account manager with you, those will be recorded and stored in the onboarding center. And so the onboarding center is a great resource, especially for new users. You can basically steer them toward the onboarding videos, and those training videos will have the training sessions that were conducted initially during the onboarding session. So that's actually a great resource for support as well. Now, in addition to those two, let's say you're really stumped on an issue, you're not sure how to do something, you can always use the ticketing module. Now, the ticketing module is built in within the system, as you can see, and it's the best way for you to reach out to us. So here I can open the ticket module. I can type in what I'm having issues with. Maybe I need additional training, or I'm seeing an error or something like that. This sequence and these couple of features here you actually won't be seeing. That's only because I'm logged in as an admin. It's important to log a correct severity, so try to keep this as accurate as possible. Urgent, for instance, would be something like, you can't ship or one of your users can't log in, and then the severities go down from there. So what you can actually do is select your severity. Let's say you require an enhancement, and maybe it's related to purchase. And you can actually log a ticket on someone's behalf. So I can say, okay, well, um, Jimmy requested this feature, and I'm going to make Jimmy a watcher of this. Now you can add other people as well to this watcher list. And this watcher list will get emailed right now every time there's a comment on this ticket or status changes. But if they don't want emails, you can untick this, and they'll only receive in-app notifications. But by default, email is a good thing to have because you'll get notified right away. And then you'll want to proceed to this description part here and put in some information about what you're experiencing. So if it's an error, be sure to include a picture. That can be really helpful for us. Or if it's, you're lost somewhere, try to be as descriptive as you can in describing your scenario. Once you're complete, once you've basically done this, you can click on Submit on the top right here. That'll basically submit the ticket to our ticketing center, where it'll get forwarded based on priority to the appropriate support resource. And then our team will be able to help you out from there, and you'll be able to access the ticket that you've submitted from the ticket center. And from the ticket center, you'll actually be able to open your tickets and carry on with that conversation. So typically what will happen is our team will reply, then you'll reply, we'll reply. Eventually the ticket will get resolved. It'll get marked as resolved, and then once it's confirmed by you, we can close it out. And you'll always be able to access closed tickets as well from this ticket center here. And so, for example, we've got closed tickets here. And so this is a great way to kind of have an additional resource in the system, because over time, once the users log several tickets and they get closed out, you can actually go to the ticket center and use this as a support resource for all your new users who are coming in. So the ticketing center is the best way to reach out to us in case you're not sure of something or in case you need additional help with anything. That's your best bet to reach out to us. All right, so I think we've covered pretty much everything in training one. Thanks for listening in. We'll be covering the other training sessions as well. And all the best with your operation of Xoro.